Hello, this is Ken Tsang, and I am going to explain my basic project. So basically, I'll go straight to the point. I developed two different architectures and models specifically designed to analyze EEG data of 8 ALS patients. We only considered 4 of the 8 in order to maximize efficiency, especially since most of the data trends were similar in all of the ALS patients. The first primary model that was derived was let me scroll up for you. It is the autoencoder model in order to predict intensification levels of the stimuli, as well as anomalies within the data. It was trained on patient 1, which had similar trends in data to all of the rest of the patients. Here we're just doing basic data pre-processing and visualizing the overall EEG data fed in from each of the EEG channels. There were a total of 8 EEG channels. Each of these names correspond to one channel on a different coordinate on the cortex of the brain of the patient, cortex of the surface of the brain of the patient. Moving down, we compute our training mean and our training standard deviation in order to normalize our data. We view the shape of the data, and we create different sequences depending on the values and their time steps. We set it to 128 since an additional 3 plus or minus 3 error was required for the milliseconds that it took to add intensification or subtract intensification values. Here we develop our sequential model, which is for the autoencoder. This autoencoder is developed specifically for unsupervised learning in order to maximize efficiency and minimize the amount of time it actually takes to train the model. We can predict more values with less data, and especially data that is not as sufficient. But in our case, we had sufficient amounts of data. Utilizing the autoencoder was prioritized and was ideal for our situation. We fit our model. We attempted to minimize the loss by activating callbacks. The callback would monitor the validation loss of the overall model, and then would adjust the mode for the minimum amount of loss. We try to minimize the amount of validation loss to achieve better results and better accuracy. We can calculate the training mean absolute error. As long as that is minimized, we can ensure that our results are more accurate and that the predicted anomalies are the correct indices of each position. So the predicted results are indices, and what they are the model predicts the indice at which an anomaly occurs. So ensuring that we can detect and predict when anomalies can occur in EEG data of ALS patients in order to prevent it from happening or preventing the intensification of a stimuli from impacting the reactivity of the EEG waves of each of the channels too much. So we can see here that as the number of samples increase, definitely the trained MAE loss definitely increases. But as we minimize it, it does go down. We can see that the model is able to plot the reactivity preceding the detection of an anomaly, so we can understand the reaction of the EEG after an anomaly has occurred, or the intensification of an anomaly of a stimuli has occurred. We can make our predictions and continue to predict where anomalies are, minimizing for mean absolute error, and normalize the test set to compute it for other patients. Our next model is a time series classification model. We computed it by concatenating 4 data sets of the 8 patients evaluated, since all of them had trends similar, like I stated in our previous autoencoder model. We evaluated, for the training features, we evaluated 8 channels, which were the 8 channels as analyzed in the autoencoder model, which had EEG values from 8 different coordinates of electrodes on the surface of the brain of the 4 patients. They were merged and they were correctly indexed, so we can analyze them in a time series basis. What we're predicting for is the Y stimuli column, which is the intensification of the stimuli. So in the experiment, each of the stimuli were intensified by a certain amount of, by a certain magnitude. So for example, 1 times, double, triple, or quadruple, going all the way up to 12 times the original intensification value. We can determine the amount of classes, 13 classes from 0 to 12 inclusive. Going down, we can see the shape of the targets in the training data set. So there's one target we're training for. Targets have 13 classes as stated up here. And there are 8 channels, which are the features for which we train the model with. Using our create dataset function, we're able to create a dataset given the time steps and the x and y, which are our data frame for the training values and the targets. We can split it accordingly. So we can split it using indices, like I've used here, and put them into NumPy arrays and reshape the NumPy array for the targets so that it's one-dimensional. As you can see here, it is. This one has included time steps as needed. The model is designed here. It's a sequential model with a bidirectional layer with a LSTM embedded within with 128 units and an input shape with the corresponding data set. As we continue down, we can see the activation functions are sigmoids. Since it is a multi-label classification problem, we need to use a sigmoid in order to compute for the multi-label problem. It's categorical, not binary, since there's not 2 classes but multiple classes, like stated before. We can compute the entire model, fit the model on the training, the X train, which is our features, and the Y train, which are our targets. Epochs are the number of times the model filters, and not filters, like goes through the data. The batch size is the amount of times it takes in the data, not the amount of times, the amount that it takes in per cycle within each epoch, and the validation split is the how we split the training data. And we're not going to shuffle the data as it's time series data and needs to be in a certain sequence. As we can see, we were able to increase the accuracy of the model, and we were able to achieve 99% between 99.0 and 99.9% accuracy. The validation accuracy was maintained at 100%. As you can see here, we've used the dropout layer to minimize, actually to completely eliminate the possibility of overfit at a rate of 0.5. And we were able to completely eliminate that. The fact that the validation accuracy is higher than the accuracy of the training data indicates that we have not overfitted, and this is truly how accurate the classification model is.